You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're here on the unceded traditional territory of the Salish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. This is Bernadine Fox, here with my co-host for the week, Don Wright, bringing you Both Sides Now. You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm co-host Don Wright.
Today, we're here with Jane Bouey and Carol Madsen from the Parent Support Services, who have done a tremendous amount of work supporting grandparents who raise their grandkids. And for those of you who do not know, I started raising my grandkid when he was 2, and he's now 20, and still kind of blows my mind about how incredibly talented he is. So places like Parent Support Services have been an important part of my life. Jane is a former school trustee and vice chair of the Vancouver School Board and has been with Parent Support Services since 2013, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And is now managing the Kinship Care Research Project, which we are going to get to talk about. But Jane is no stranger to Vancouver Co-op Radio because she did a show called Media Mornings, yeah. So here at Vancouver Co-op Radio for several years herself. So welcome, Jane. And Carol.
Thank you.
You were surprised, but I'm glad you're here. You're the Executive Director of Parent Support Services, and you've been there for...
I've been there for 5 years now.
Right. It's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And you're doing great things there.
We are doing great things.
So for the listeners, maybe tell us what Parent Support Services is.
Well, Parent Support Services Society was started in 1974, and what its main focus is trying to our mission is to have a world where all children and their families are nurtured, valued, and safe. So in the way that we do that, our core program is through parenting circles. So support circles for parents that are raising kids or grandparents that are raising their grandchildren, right. Aunties and uncles. And those are peer-to-peer support circles. Right. And we have trained facilitators that do those circles. We have them across the province, and they're run in different languages and in different communities. It's an exciting program, and like our thinking is that there was a time when, we all worked collectively to raise children, right. And time has gone by, and there's a lot more isolation, and right. it's a way to build an intentional support circle around right. around yourself and your parenting.
But you also have developed support circles just for grandparents raising grandkids, because that is a special kind of situation.
Yeah, and what happened is around a decade or so ago, we started getting more and more phone calls from grandparents who were raising their grandchildren, usually because of their adult child wasn't able to care for their children mm-hmm. because of things like substance abuse, mental health issues, incarceration, a whole number of reasons right. why they just didn't have the capacity to right. be able to raise their children. Lots of different reasons. Anyway, those numbers have increased, and currently 1/3 of our circles, our support circles around the province, are for kinship caregivers, right. is what we call them, grandparents and aunties and uncles and others that are raising their kids.
Yeah. My grandkid has 4 siblings, and they're all raised by different members in the family, not by their parents. Yeah. Yes. So there's about 13,000 kids that are being raised by their grandparents or kinship care.
That's our conservative estimate. We suspect there are a lot more. That's based on the numbers that we got from Statistics Canada. But we know that a lot of families don't want to disclose that that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. There's informal arrangements, a fear that if the government knows that they're doing that, there may be the involvement of the ministry, right. Nervousness around that, as well as just a significant percentage of Indigenous Indigenous people didn't participate in the census at all. So we suspect there's a lot more, but we'll go with 13,000 because it works. So
there really is never a good reason why grandkids show up and start living with their grandparents, right? It's not like something nice happened. It's something traumatic usually. So the a traumatized child is ending up in the home with another traumatized adult who's also dealing with whatever that bad thing was. So when you're doing these circles, is that an issue that comes up a lot, or what are the issues that come up?
Yeah, by and large, the children that are being raised in kinship care are kids that would otherwise be in government care.
Right.
And so these are families where people like you stepped up to the plate and took these children in. And the issues that are talked about in our support circles, a lot of it is to do with the challenges that those children face. They, because they've experienced trauma, they often have issues around a whole number of things. But also sometimes they all have some unique challenges, right. As well as there's just the concerns that kinship caregivers have around trying to deal with the systems. It's
right.
incredibly difficult to figure out where you go to get help.
Oh God,
how
yeah.
even the process of registering your children in school, depending on what kind of legal arrangement you have, can sometimes be very, very difficult
right.
for people to deal with. So it's so there's also those kinds of challenges that are discussed in those circles.
I remember when this happened to me, which was 18 years ago now. There was no place that I knew of that Grandparents Raising Grandkids, you could go and get information or help or services or anything. And I remember being traumatized, having to be okay for a very small child who was traumatized, and having absolutely no idea who to talk to or where to go or who to find information. How do you get legal information? How do you find services for the kid? How do you get your child tax benefits, sent over to you and not the person that it is going to? So, and also the other thing that I remember is having to relearn parenting. Because it's not the same. You raise your children, and you're now 20 years later raising another child, and it's very different. Yeah, I think I'm a much better parent, but anyway.
Yeah, just on what you were just saying, that I think it's important for listeners to know that we have our support circles, and we also have a support line for grandparents and aunts and uncles that are looking for answers to the questions that you were raising, that you struggled with. So people can call that. We have a toll-free number for that, and it's 1-855-474-9777. And you can find out more about that on our website, which is www.parentsupportbc.ca, and there's just one S in there, so parentsupportbc.ca. You can find information about all our different services there.
Okay, I'll probably get you to repeat that
Yeah.
in a bit. So if I was to call the support line, what would happen?
Well, we have two advocates on our line. We have a Master of Social Work and a lawyer, and they help people navigate through systems, give advice, and so there's emotional support is available there, as well as figuring out how you can get the Canada Child benefit when it appears you're not supposed to be able to get it. One of the things that Carol always says is that before anyone signs anything, they should call our line, because often people are given advice by lawyers or social workers where it's not that those people intentionally are giving the wrong advice, but they don't know all of what's available. They don't know the consequences, particularly the financial consequences of making certain decisions.
Exactly, because there are so many ways that a child can be, like child in the home of a relative is being phased out, but there's restricted foster care, and there's kinship care. Is that what it's called?
It's the extended family program. And then there's just a multitude of...
And then the 5401.
54.01, 54.1.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in here
Sure.
too. Thanks, Brittany. And yeah, one of the things that we do on the support line is it is really complex. And so we're really excited that we have somebody with legal knowledge and a master's of social worker. So the two advocates on that line have really niche knowledge, very deep knowledge.
Cool.
We're like I'd say we're experts in the field across the province. And so as Jane, I'm just going to reiterate that again, we always ask people, stop, don't sign anything. Phone our experts, phone our advocate social worker, phone our advocate lawyer before you embark on anything. And I think what Jane was alluding to is it's really important to do that as quickly as possible because you can go down a pathway, and once you've gone down one pathway, it can have huge ramifications financially for you. So our advocates are really helping the callers navigate complex social, financial, and legal issues.
That's huge, actually. Yeah. 2 of my grandkids are in restricted foster care with their aunt, and the other 2 are in a 5401 with somebody who's a family friend, now family. So it's different. And of course, my grandchild is in a home in the child in the home of a relative. So 3 different kinds of ways that children end up being cared for by kinship.
Yeah, and what kind of financial and other types of supports those children receive depends on where they are in that continuum of
and it varies
of options. Yes,
varies dramatically. So, we're going to just stop here and take a little break. But when we come back, I want to talk about your research project that you've been doing because that sounds really exciting.
Vancouver Co-op Radio is hiring a full-time reporter. We are relaunching our Morning Drive news show with funding provided by the Local Journalism Initiative. As a staff reporter, you will work alongside our morning news team to deliver the daily news with an emphasis on the downtown east side, home to diverse and interesting people and cultures who are continually misrepresented in the mainstream. If you have a background in professional journalism, this is an amazing opportunity to broadcast your stories across the entire region. Send your cover letter, resume, and links to your portfolio to morningnews@coopradio.org. That's morningnews@coopradio.org.
Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always some reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day. I need some distraction. Oh, beautiful release. Memories seep from my veins. Let me be empty. Oh, weightless, and maybe I'll find some peace tonight. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. So tired of the straight vultures and thieves at your back. Storm keeps on twisting. You keep on building the lies that you make up for all that you lack. It don't make no difference. Escape one last time. It's easier to believe in this sweet madness, all this glorious sadness that brings me to my knees in the arms of the angel. Fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. In the arms of the angel, may you find some comfort here. You're in the arms of the angel, may you find some comfort here.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox,
And I'm co-host Don Wright.
and we're chatting with Jane Bouey and Carol Madsen from an organization that has support groups for grandparents raising grandkids. And one of the things that you guys are doing that I find very, very exciting is that you've done a research project. And I filled it out. I know I'm too late to actually send it in. But
No, you're not too late.
I'm not. There's a deadline. It said there was a deadline. Can I just give this
You
to
can give it to me,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So I wanted to do it even though I thought it was too late because I wanted to see what kind of information that you're looking at getting. And it sounds very extensive and very... it's going to give you some real meaty stuff to work with. Well, so where did this come from?
Well, as Jane stated earlier, we've been running these support groups, and we've been running the support line. The support line now has been on for almost 9 years, and we keep hearing these stories over and over and over again. And we get callers that are not just ministry involved or involved with VACFAS,
Right.
but callers from all over the province. And there are a number of people that call our line that have no involvement with the ministry, and they have lots of issues. And when we were talking with the ministry, at one point they said that they knew the state of kinship care families in British Columbia. And we said, well, maybe not all of them, because we're hearing some different stories. And so
Right.
what we really wanted to do is we wanted to get some research to back some of the stories.
Right.
And we're looking for some change.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of the things is that the stories that we've heard over the years, it's just so clear that there's real injustice that these families face.
Yeah.
So we've got funding from the Law Foundation of BC as well as the Victoria Foundation's Adoption and Permanency Fund. Using that money, that's the intention. We have a survey where we're learning a lot in depth about those families, including trying to get a sense of who the children are, because that's
Right.
something that you don't see a lot of information
No.
in terms of any research that's been done. So we want to have that picture so that we can develop some recommendations based on what we've learned. We're also doing some focus groups. We have a focus group coming up. Focus groups coming up this week. We have one. I don't know when this is going to be.
That's
airing.
okay. If you give me that information, I'll put it on the website afterwards so people
there's
can go look for it.
there's ones coming up here in Vancouver as well as in Surrey and Abbotsford. where we're learning more, but we also are still doing interviews over the phone as well. So if people want to get involved in this, just go to our website and find out more. But I lost my train of thought there.
That's okay.
But I guess it's that using that information, the idea is that we'll develop some recommendations based on what we've learned. And out of those, and with those recommendations, we want to take those recommendations to those families that we've been working with,
Right.
The kinship caregivers themselves, as well as the youth that are living in those families, and support them in developing a network so that they can advocate for themselves.
Right.
And we think there's some really good positive chances for change. The ministry has been meeting with us. We've had a few opportunities. They reached out to talk to Parent Support Services because they recognize that we know kinship caregivers. They want to learn from us, but
Right.
and through those discussions, there's been some important changes made. There were increases in maintenance rates that some kinship caregivers received to bring them up to the same level as foster parents. That's one of the things
and-
that frustrate people the most is
Right.
the fact that they can see foster parents, like if kinship caregivers didn't bring
Right.
in the child
Right.
themselves, those children would end up in foster care.
Right.
And so the strangers, the foster families are receiving, they've been receiving significantly higher rates of support
Right.
than kinship caregivers. Now, in some cases now that's been leveled out and even so that they're receiving basically the same levels of support. But the families that are receiving that's a very small percentage
And which
of kinship
program?
caregivers.
That's a kinship program, or what's it called again?
It's the extended family program,
Okay.
as well as a couple of the other options that there are out there are receiving the same basic rate as foster
Right.
parents.
Right.
But the vast majority of kinship caregivers aren't in that. Like the number of families that are in the kinship care program, the number of kids is something like, I don't know.
Well, I think, when I started working at Parent Support Services Society about 5 years ago, when I first met you, Bernadine, I think there was something like over 2,000 kids that were or families that were in the Child in the Home of the Relative
Right.
program. And so gradually there's been attrition, but from that program, people have been aging out of it.
Yes.
But
Because
now
it
it's
ended
been
in 2010.
Yeah, but it was replaced by another program called the Extended Family Program, and we
Right.
know those numbers are in the low hundreds.
Oh.
And so it's like, well,
Wow.
and yet, so we're just kind of looking and thinking, well, that's interesting. How does that all work?
Yeah.
So
How
But
do you reach out to people for your study? Because like you said, a lot of people are not involved in the ministry. So how do you, and I would imagine their issues are different because they are not supported by a ministry.
Yeah. Well, it's a struggle making contact with kinship caregivers. So we utilize our own sort of networks of networks of networks. We through our support circles, we have contact with a significant number of kinship caregivers, and then they also know other people who know other people. Our organization has developed some strong relationships with Indigenous communities, and that's another place where we're able to reach out and make those connections. So it's we've done a little bit of using social media
Right.
as well, but it's a hard thing to reach out
Right.
and find these families and to get them involved in our research and to give them the kind of support that they deserve.
Yeah.
But Jane, like what Bernadine was saying earlier, which I thought I glommed onto it immediately, was Bernadine said, 3 of her relatives are raising kids. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing. I've got that in the back of my head, and I'm going to say to Jane, Jane, we need to get Bernadine to see if we can get some of her other people to complete
Right.
that survey or participate in our focus group.
I could do that. Yes.
I-
So when you say about the numbers, like 2,000 in Child in the Home of a Relative, and now there's a few hundred in extended care, do you think that there are less and less people who are being able to access services or financial assistance for raising these children?
Oh, I don't know that that's the case. I
Okay.
haven't got any information on that. What's happened is people are being steered in different directions, and the fact is that there hasn't in BC there hasn't been a way since the time of the child in the home of the relative to have a program that's as easily accessible as that one was.
For some
there
people.
were less hoops to jump through than there are with some of the other programs that exist. But the vast majority of people aren't getting any support at all. So if you for instance, if you've adopted your child, there's nothing.
Or legal guardianship. I was initially told that you became the legal guardian for this kid, so you don't get to get child in the home of relative. But as a squeaky wheel gets the attention, I was really infuriated that my child, who had a drug addiction, and that was why this kid came into my care, was getting all of these services. Like her nothing changed in her world. She got counseling, she got housing, she got all of these things paid for, and this kid got basically thrown out. That the file was closed, her medical was taken away, her daycare was taken away, and she was just handed to me. And I just kept saying this over and over and over and over and over until finally they said, fine, go and get child in the home of relative. And the director of that office actually came and sat in the room with me to make sure everything was done right. And then, they wanted to make me stop talking to them. So, I've been mouthy for a long time. So when is this research going to be compiled?
Oh, the final report should be done at the end of March, and then we'll be releasing probably a more accessible kind of report following that. So.
Okay.
Keep tuned, and we'll probably we'll be working to get some media coverage once we have an actual report to go out.
Well, we'll have you back.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You need bigger media coverage than me, but we'll have you back.
Well, this is huge.
So people who are raising somebody else's in their family child, if they need support, they can call you at this number at 1-855-474-9777.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Or they can email grgline@parentsupportbc.ca. But it's better to call the number.
Okay. And it sounds like you guys have a wealth of information. You used to have a booklet as well. Do you still have that? It wasn't a booklet, actually. It was quite an amazing...
The legal guide?
Yes. Do you still have that available for people? It's out of date.
It was updated in 2014, and it's up on our website.
Okay.
But it's still that helps a bit. But I think that most people would find talking to our support line the most help.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So they can talk to the support line. They can go on the web and get other information. They can find out about support services in terms of group circles and that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think I just want to say first thing though is if somebody's asking you to take on your grandchildren or to take on a relative's kids, stop, breathe, do not sign anything, phone the support line.
Right.
That's what we like to tell everybody.
And Monday to Friday, regular business hours?
Yes, and then if the hours are if there's no one answering the line at that time, they'll call back within 24 hours.
Okay.
Monday to Friday, yeah.
Monday to Friday. Okay. All right, that's great. Thank you so much for coming in. I can't wait to see what comes of this research, and I will send it off to my family members and get a couple more filled out for you. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tickets are on sale now for the 19th Annual Talking Stick Festival, February 18th to 29th at various Vancouver venues. The 2020 festival theme is Chenchenstoy, a Squamish word that translates as upholding each other, lifting each other up. TSF is a vibrant celebration of Indigenous artistry, expertise, talent, and knowledge from around the world, presented through theatrical performances, music, dance, film and visual art exhibits, the industry series and knowledge sharing workshops, young audience and family programming, the annual celebration of powwow culture, the Métis Fair, and much more. Many performances are free or pay what you can. For more information, go to talkingstickfest.ca. Talking Stick is produced by Full Circle, First Nations Performance.
Now y'all sit back and sing with us, would you?
Grandma's hands clapped to church on a Sunday morning. Grandma's hands played a tambourine so well. My grandma's hands used to issue out a warning. She say, Chrissy Lee, don't you run so fast. You might fall down on a piece of glass. There might be a snake down in that grass. Grandma's hands, my grandma's hands, grandma's hands, my grandma's hands, grandma's hands, showed the look on where mother's. Grandma's hands pick me up each time I fell. My grandma's hands used to lift her and tell her. She say, baby, grandma understands that you really do love that man. Put yourself in Jesus' hands. Grandma's hands, my grandma's hands, grandma's hands. Y'all raise your glasses up in there, come on. My grandma's hands. Yes, I like seeing y'all. Grandma's hands used to hand me a piece of candy. Grandma's hands picked me up each time I fell. My grandma's hands, boy, they really came in handy. She say, Chrissy Lee, don't you whoop that boy. What you got to go and spank him for? You know, he ain't dropped no apple core, but I don't have grandma no more. Grandma's hands, my grandma's hands, grandma's hands, my grandma's hands. I want y'all to say, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Now y'all say, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm co-host Don Wright.
And we are lucky to have an artist here called Chrissy Cheung. And she's a curator based in Vancouver. She has a BFA from Concordia, and her work has been appreciated all over the place. But she has curated a show called... what is it called? Is it called Invisible?
Yes, it is.
It isn't called Invisible. That is currently up in Edmonton, but it has a version of it has been in Miami. And it's an exhibition that explores mental health awareness. And so I brought Chrissy here to talk a little bit about her show and her group. She has a group called Painter 8. So what is Painter 8? Let's start there.
So Painter 8 started in basically 2013. I became a mom and I was staying home a lot and I couldn't have a studio anymore. So I moved the studio to my basement so I could in a way be a mom and then run downstairs and paint sometimes. But then I missed out on the community and just running into artists, and then basically I wasn't going to shows, so I was never talking about art, and I didn't have an adult conversation with my kid. So so I decided just through email that I would just invite artist friends that I liked and sort of just had more of a dialogue. And it was very casual. It was, whenever someone finished painting, they would show it, or an in progress, or someone had difficulty, or oh, how do you make that dry faster? Mm-hmm. And then random, interest in music theater books, right, and how that philosophy came in. And some people were really into long books, and some people were like, give me the short version. Mm-hmm. And then we started actually reading this book called Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. And I don't know if you know that writer, but he had a big episode of depression. Mm. And okay, so let's just fast forward a bit. 4 years later, one of the artists said, Chrissy, we've been talking a long time. Maybe we should all have a show together. Mm-hmm. And said that I should curate. And I've never curated before. And as I had moved to Montreal, everyone was moving different places.
Right.
And so it became a little bit of a cross-Canada group.
Right.
And people are still moving around. And then I moved to Vancouver.
Right.
So it was sort of, at the time, there was 8 of us. And so we were painters. So it was just very forward, Painter 8. Mm-hmm.
So that's how Painter 8 came about. So, artists tackle all kinds of subject matters, and, everything from the sublime to the complicated, and from abstract to hyperrealism. You created an exhibition on mental health. Where did that come from?
So while we were discussing what kind of show we should have, we all have had our own shows. And so we wanted it to be more public, and, there's a lot of us involved. So we, kind of more people, the bigger impact, and let's do something meaningful, And we came up with this mental health theme, and, actually some of us were kind of apprehensive because, that's a big subject. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? And, we wanted to kind of, I wanted them to dig deep, and some of them were maybe I'll just do the light one, like anxiety. But so, meanwhile, I'm pretty used to writing these, grant proposals, to get into artist-run centers.
Right.
So you kind of have to have a better description before we pitch it.
Right.
So, so I made one, and I put it on our website. I'm also kind of the web designer for it. And
so you're everything. You're the organizer and the curator and the webmaster.
They all, some of them have graphic capability, but I have a server, so why not?
So what topics did you tackle?
So we tackled anxiety, depression, because within the group, half of them had one, so they sort of ended up going to something they knew more, Craig had affectio schizio disorder.
Schizoaffective disorder.
Yeah, you're
yes.
right.
Yeah.
And then bipolar disorder was addressed, and we just hung loose with psychosis, as it can go various directions.
Right.
But when we anxiety and depression became a more major theme, because we all experienced it. When someone sort of actually noticed one of the artists in New York, his name at the time, he was part of our group, Gavin Sewell. This Miami dealer jumped onto our site because he was part of us.
Right.
And so saw this proposal
Right.
that I had written for everybody and anybody. And she called us.
Cool.
And she invited us to Miami
That's very cool.
to do this big show. And, you know, shipping, you know, crossing the border, you know, flying.
That's a big show.
That's a big show, yeah.
Yes.
And it was her inaugural show at Mod Art Gallery.
Wow.
And we called it Whisper. That was our original pitch because, well, it's a very eloquent title. And it went really well. And then you know, remember, I'm still doing this pitch in Canada.
Right.
It's just way slower.
Right.
And so we got to Edmonton.
Right.
But because, you know, that artwork went there, it's the same theme, but we decided to change the title for Edmonton, Galerie La Cité, and it was called Invisible because mental health, illness is often invisible.
Yes.
But it was the same subject matter, but actually this is our second time. So actually now we're better. I would say because we have the gist, and well, actually, I was completely new at curating, and to jump all the way to Miami first was
That's incredible
a big
that
deal.
you managed to pull that off. Way to go.
Thanks. So, you know, shipping in Canada is easy.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And that was received well too. I called the mayor, and he gave us a message, and I'm
Cool.
giving you that. And
That's Mayor Don Evison?
Yes.
He's the mayor of Edmonton?
yes. And
sounds
it
like a
was
wonder-
nice. He wrote a message
He
for our
did,
show,
yeah.
and I think it gave a lot of you know, interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the opening, and so it's a 2-floor center in La Cité Francophone, which is the French Cultural Center of Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
And within the walls, they call it Galerie Cité. So it's very public. It's open 7 days a week, and we have 42 artworks there by 8 artists across Canada. I'm from Montreal to
Right.
Vancouver.
Right.
And yeah, and everybody's style is different, and that's what I like about the group, that not everyone had to be like an impressionist.
Right.
So there's from abstraction to conceptualism to hyperrealism to regular figurative, and then we have a textile artist from Toronto, Kai Chan. He's
Right.
the guest artist. And all types of in between, because there was some drawing elements too. I like to show a little bit of concept so that it wasn't just painting. It was
Right.
like
No, it crossed. I looked at the catalog. There was a wide range of mediums and types and all kinds of stuff. So it was great. So you have done a couple pieces here that I'm going to put up on the web. One is called Lurking and one is called Low Tide. Those are your pieces. Is that correct?
yes, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about these, like Lurking? What was that one about?
So they're kind of like a diptych. I often work in Paris, and this one was particularly about bipolar disorder, or it used to be called manic depression.
Right.
And because it refers directly to the highs and the lows,
Yes.
and which, in a figurative, abstract sense, are not actually bad things.
No.
Because, like, when you're low, you isolate yourself, and you kind of maybe get a sense of clarity, and that's the blue one.
This is this one here.
This one here.
Okay.
But there's a lot maybe going on in your mind, and a lot of, like, I call it roughage and just nocturnal, just like exactly what that picture is. You're just clouded in a way.
The picture, maybe John can help me describe it. The picture really is blues and yellows, and there's a lot of movement. It's an abstract piece, in a lot of different sort of almost individual areas in the piece itself. So
Right. Some areas are quite open, some are quite cluttered.
Right.
So I think the composition of the painting is one thing, but also the colors. Like, what does blue mean to you? What does red mean to you? What emotional range do those colors represent?
I'm glad you picked up on that, because I'm a little bit of a colorist, and I subscribe to Goethe's theory that yellow and blue were the primaries, because when you make yellow and blue, they become green, and the after image becomes magenta. So he kind of took out red. And so if I'm just dealing with the primary, yellow and blue, it becomes a kind of a pure, like you're back to the basics. It means I'm just dealing with like light and form. And so I felt that when you're low, you just got the basics. You're not dealing with the social life. You're just kind of retracting, and I would call it an alone time.
And so the lurking was meant to represent the highs.
The highs are dramatic because there's a darkness to it, because there's more daringness. There's like maybe some anger and angst, but it's also a strange excitement. If you would have to take out the word mania, and it's reacting higher in the top area.
So in the orange area, so people can't see this, of course, because it's on the radio. So it's a painting that is also abstract and is basically use of colors and spaces, but there's orange on the top and there's a greenish and blues on the bottom. Well, sort of all mixed up, but yeah.
I would say it has the same intensity, but because of the colors, it's deeper and stronger. It has more force. They're like exactly the same size, so when you see them together, they have quite a push-pull effect.
Right.
It's like
which is kind of what bipolar is. It's kind of a push-pull, definitely.
And I think reds and that tonal range represent more of a passionate, whether it be love or anger, but that kind of intense passionality, whereas the blues are more calm and serene.
Yeah, so I basically just wanted to depict the feeling, and I think colors depict that very well. And without knowing about the disorder, you can kind of feel it maybe if you just stood in front of the painting.
So how long is your exhibition up for?
So it is on until February 29th in Edmonton.
And it's at the Gallery
Cité.
Cité?
Yes.
And if people want more information, where should they go?
So it's on if you just type in Gallery Cité Edmonton, it will come up. But we also link on our website, www.painter8.ca.
Okay.
And all the information is there. Basically, I believe Monday to Friday, it's open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturdays 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Sundays 9 to 5.
Okay. And you still have this proposal out there? You're still looking for more spaces to move this exhibition to? Am I correct in that?
Well, we actually have a location in Vancouver called, you must know, Interurban Gallery.
Yes.
What we lack is the funding to like ship artwork, and this digital catalog we made, we wanted to make in print so it can be distributed and talked about more. Just digital is great for the environment, but sometimes you need to have it in places.
Right, absolutely. It's one thing to see something in a picture. It's a whole other thing to stand in front of it and take it in. So, yeah.
So we have applied to like the Vancouver Cultural Grant, and you just never know. So I think it's an important message, and I'm really happy it got picked up in Miami and in Edmonton. For me, that's like a projection that is fulfilled.
Yeah,
I know from the work how powerful art therapy is. Do you have art therapists affiliated in any way?
No, I didn't know how to meet any, but we had tried to like do research by talking with mental health professionals in the field, and we got some great insight because the Miami show had even subject matter borderline personality, and there's just kind of a lot of mental illnesses that not an average person knows, and you have to dig a little deeper and find more. But I actually almost studied that, but it's hard to get in.
in art therapy.
I almost went into art therapy as well, but it wasn't a master's granting program, so I figured I would go the counseling route. But I use art therapy with my clients, have done. And the agency almost always has an art therapist on staff. And for a lot of people who can't articulate their experiences, art is a really good way for them to get it out there. And once it's on paper, it's easier for them to talk about it.
I'm sorry, we have to wrap this up, but we'll pick that up again, I'm sure. definitely. So thank you, Chrissy, for coming in, and I wish you luck in your exhibition, and we'll look forward to having it come here at Interurban. So let us know when that's happening, and we'll put it up on our website as well.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Derek White Sky Cloud from Métis Matters Radio. I'm on Wednesday nights at 5 o'clock. Vancouver Cooperative Radio is an innovative non-profit radio station and recording studio with a mission to produce creative and engaging programming for communities whose voices are unrepresented in the mainstream media. We need your financial support to help us achieve this mission. By donating today, you'll help us to continue providing access to training and equipment for over 300 volunteers who produce over 140 hours of original programming in over 10 languages. We strive to provide programming that does not discriminate against people on the grounds of sex, race, age, class, ability, orientation, or anything else. Since 1975, we have celebrated the rich cultural diversity of the Greater Vancouver area through our arts, our music, and spoken word programming. Donate today by visiting coopradio.org
or calling 604-684-8494.
Think of younger days when I lived for my life. Was everything a man could want to do. I could never see tomorrow. I was never told about the sorrow, and how can you mend a broken heart? How can you stop the rain from falling down? Tell me, how can you stop the sun from shining? What makes the world go round? And how can you mend this broken man? How can a loser ever win? Somebody please help me mend my broken heart and let me live again. La 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 la. I can still feel the breeze that rustles through the trees and misty memories of days gone by. But we could never see tomorrow. Would you believe that no one ever told us about the sorrow? So how can we make a broken heart? And mine is, How can you stop the rain from falling down? Can you stop that old sun from shining? What makes the world go round? And sometimes I have to say, la 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 la, yeah. La 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 la. Tell me, help me mend my broken heart. I just wanna live again, baby. How can you mend this broken man? Yeah. Somebody tell me, how can a loser ever win? Baby, I'm gonna say, baby, help me mend this old broken heart. I think I believe I feel like
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox. Kinship care includes not just grandparents, but aunts, uncles, other older siblings, and for some of the children in my family, a close family friend. And I need to reiterate, because it is so often believed that a child who has been removed from a home where their needs were not being met and placed with a safe relative, that suddenly they're fine and all is okay and all will be okay, and nothing could be further from the truth. No child ends up living in a home of a family member because something wonderful happened, something bad happened. And because of that, both caregivers and kids start out in this new part of their lives in trauma. Suddenly, grandparents are raising children again after decades of not doing so. And because someone in their lives has died, is addicted to drugs, or has become otherwise incapacitated. Children are suddenly not in their homes, in their own beds, or going to their own schools. Their whole routine has been upset, and they come to their kinship caregiver because they have either witnessed trauma, drug use, or criminal acts in their homes. They may have experienced direct trauma, whether physical, emotional, sexual, or severe neglect. So there's a real need for support for both kinship caregivers and for children. So a reminder, if you find yourself suddenly raising a grandchild, a niece, or a nephew, reach out to the people who are there to provide you with support, and that's Parent Support Services. Their advice is also to stop before you sign anything, regardless of whether it's a social worker or a lawyer who seems to have all your best interests in mind. Don't sign anything until you have chatted with their expert support team so that you are fully aware of your options to get the best support possible for the child and yourself. Again, their support line is 1-855-474-9777. That's 1-855-474-9777, and their website is www.parentsupportbc.ca, and I will put all of that on our website's resource page for you in case you didn't get a chance to write it down. We were entertained today by Sarah McLaughlin, Bill Withers, Al Green, and Sherry Ulrich. My thanks to Jane Bouey and Carol Madsen from Parent Support Services for chatting with us today, and to Chrissy Cheung from Painter 8 for coming in and letting us know about the exhibition entitled Invisible on Mental Health that she curated. Also, my thanks to Don Wright for co-hosting, and to Steve for working our board. But most importantly, our thanks goes out to you for joining us today. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, bothsidesnow@coopradio.org, or via Twitter @BothSidesNowBC. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
I can't seem to find my way.